This is Faith Fulcrum, a podcast for anyone trying to balance faith and tradition with contemporary challenges. I'm Mark Baldridge.
I'm Scott Simpson, and our conversation grows from a lifetime friendship born within a Bible-centered community of believers. We don't always agree.
So you don't have to either. Weigh what we have to say in the scales of your own faith and see. This week's episode is Christmas to Easter, Spirituality versus Religion. It's funny, I have had occasion to think a couple of times just recently about what I might call like the Puritan experiment in America, England trying to get rid of their undesirables. There's a lot of religious weirdos, number one among them, the Puritans. Also in this part of the world where I'm living, a lot of Friends, the Society of Friends.
Right, Quakers.
Known as Quakers. And other people that the civilized English found intolerable for their religious views.
Right.
I was just thinking recently that the Puritans are the only people I know in America ever tried to ban Christmas.
Christmas is a really good example, something in which colonial Christianity kind of melded itself with some more pagan kind of traditions, which it did quite often. That was a big thing for the Roman Empire, to make buds by kind of melding religious traditions. And, of course, if you're very, very, very serious about your own tradition, you don't like that sort of thing.
I believe that's called syncretism.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right. But I think that's interesting because that's where so many different interesting little offshoots of religious practice or where they come from. Just like anything in culture, they're like a melding or a intertwining of a couple of different traditions. And
well, you're right to say that even pagan Rome was very adept at subverting, if you want to call it, or co-opting the religious and cultural traditions of the places that it conquered and subsumed, replacing their gods with Roman gods, just switching the names around.
Right.
And the early Christian church was doing a lot of that, as particularly as Rome became Christian. They kept that gift for swinging the way of the locals.
Yeah.
That's how we get, bunny rabbits and eggs in a celebration of the resurrection. I mean, I defy you to tell me where that is in the Bible. So
yeah.
Definitely these are pagan traditions from outside Christianity that have become embedded.
That's right. I did, interestingly enough, just as a side note, I did look up the original Saint Nicholas. He was noted for being a very good gift giver to people he agreed with, but he met a guy that was a heretic and slugged him in the face. And that's the other thing that St. Nicholas was known for. So
slugging people in the face.
Slugging heretics. Yeah.
He says, ho, 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 and then you get a knuckle sandwich. Well, that's great stuff. So we're talking about spiritual practices from around the world that somehow get subsumed into Christianity and maybe vice versa. You can think of examples like Santeria and other times when Christian saints become almost the gods of a new religion someplace else.
Right.
So spirituality definitely has an energy and it motivates people, but it tends to have its own, or it can take on many forms.
Right.
Spirituality, one form in India, one form in America, one form in Christian Rome.
Yeah.
And religion we think of as being more formalized, less likely to just erupt in new forms, tradition-based and sometimes tradition-bound.
Well, spirituality, the root word spirit has to do with breath. Religion has to do with ligament, reconnecting. There's it seems to me, and I could be wrong, but it's always seemed to me that religion is a set of ways of connecting in specific and maybe correct ways with a God or the God, whereas spirituality has to do with this difficult to see transcendent thing that we're all sharing. Everything that's alive because it's breathing, And there's this kind of, I don't know.
Well, even plants are breathing. That's interesting. I like to hear a little amateur etymology. I do have amateur. I've been paid for that before. For doing etymology?
Yeah.
You're a professional etymologist. Well, as long as you're not an entomologist, because I can't stand the people who don't know the difference between etymology and entomology. That really bugs me.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I'm going to cut that joke. Okay, so what we're talking about today is, in a way, a kind of conflict between spirituality and religion. Mm-hmm. There is a question that has come up, and I encountered it just recently in an academic setting, but you've seen it elsewhere.
Yeah.
People want to know if one can be spiritual without being religious.
Right.
And that's a question that people feel like is a viable one. And I wanted to address that question and to examine its viability as a question.
It seems like this question has come up a lot more recently. It's a thing that's on people's minds. I'm not sure that the separation between those two things was as much in the conversation maybe 100 years ago, 500 years ago. I don't know. Maybe it was, but it seems like maybe a uniquely contemporary thing.
I think you're right. It comes out of this question really kind of arises from a fairly new phenomenon. People saying, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. Or I'm spiritual, not religious. They're making a distinction. And it's a rejection of religion and religiosity and organized religion. That's what they're against. As if like somehow anarchic religion, somehow that would be... Maybe it would be better. I'm not trying to say it wouldn't. I'm just suggesting that maybe what they really, really mean is religion.
Right. Well, and I think it comes from... In my experience, in the people who have talked about that, it comes from two places. Either it's coming from their own trauma within some religious order, some religious sect, or it comes from an overall sense of the historic oppression of colonialist religious practice where nations were overwhelmed and overtaken in the name not only of the king, but also of God.
Christianity in arms, Christianity as an invading force that comes with the conquistadors or whoever we're talking about. Right behind them are the priests, and they are ready to burn libraries like, for instance, the Aztec codexes and whatnot, that we're only just lucky to have any peace left because they were so thoroughly destroyed by a priesthood that thought of themselves as being in the right and not needing to know what anyone else thought. That seems apparent.
There seems to always be this thing that, I see something that the core seems good, but the practice of it seems disingenuous or destructive or whatever else. And I think that gets at maybe the heart of what people are trying to do when they say, I want to be spiritual but not religious. Maybe.
I'm often witness to critique of Christian culture, of Christian voices, of Christian politics. Often it's when Christianity has entered the political forum. You see people saying, if only Christians would follow the Bible or follow Jesus. And the idea being that somehow the religion has lost track of its roots, of its founder, its founding voices, its core beliefs. But you'll see the same thing sometimes in Christian commentary on Islam. If only these believers would follow the teachings of their... But both of those seem to be suggesting that there's something good at the core.
Yeah.
That the message, the core message, and the original message, and the founding voices, whether it's the Prophet Muhammad in Islam or Jesus in Christianity or maybe the apostles, early teachers in Islam, you get this sense that we should be somehow hearkening back to an earlier set of messages, and that would solve a lot of problems people see with the religions they're critiquing. I find it kind of funny or strange that even people who don't believe in the religion they're critiquing seem to think that religion has at its core or in its beginnings some kernel of truth or some viable message that really should be appreciated and brought out.
I'm wondering if this whole idea of I'm spiritual, not religious, has something to do with spirituality. Seems like something I do and I let you do and whatever. Whereas religion seems inherently, there is a right way to do this, and I'm going to do it, and you must too.
You had a passage you wanted to read from Acts.
It's over in Acts. We're in Acts 17, and I think I'll start in verse 22. But Paul is out missionarying in Athens, where there's lots and lots of gods. And there's all of these different altars to different gods. So Paul stood up then in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you're very religious. For as I walk around and I look carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship. And this is what I'm going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth and does not live in temples built by human hands. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man, he made all the nations and that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God does this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he's not very far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring." So, Paul's doing this thing where he knows he's presenting something that's very different. But and maybe it's kind of that Roman thing all over again. He's taking where they're at and saying this. But his point here is that all of this altering and templing and all of that stuff, and he's saying, no, none of that matters. This God is untethered from all of that.
In the belief system, the fellowship in which you and I grew up, there was a very strong sense that since the New Testament makes no mention of musical instruments in worship and singing, that we should not have musical instruments in worship and singing. And the fact that there are plenty of Old Testament references didn't wash, because there was just this sense, and it was always kind of came down to this, of being safe. The sense that they're not mentioned, there's no prohibition against them. But since they're not mentioned, it's safer. And the idea of being safe from a God who is going to come thundering in and reject you for eternity because you had a banjo in your worship. I always have respected that urge to do things right, to get them right, to be right in the sight of God. But it strikes me as very superstitious and huddled and bullied to say, he didn't say no, but he didn't say yes. And even though previously he'd ordered people to bang the tambourine or, strike up the harp or whatever, that guy, he's so unpredictable and so irrational that we have to go down to the lowest possible common denominator in order to be safe from God.
This brings up the difference between the sacred and the secular. Okay, because I've spoken with people. I've told them about my religious upbringing and that. Not using instruments in worship. People who are not familiar with that at all, the thing that they say to me, because I play a lot of instruments, they say, well, how did you learn to play instruments? And I'm like, okay, well, you're misunderstanding. It's not that instruments were evil. It's not that playing instruments was sinful. It's that they were a secular thing. That's fine. You want to play guitar on the weekend? You want to, go out and play guitar? That's great. That's terrific. Go for it. It's that the sacred thing of worship is that's not supposed to happen there. And so there's this religion quite often, as opposed to spirituality, makes this separation between the sacred and the secular. You do things differently on Sunday morning than you would do the rest of the week. Religion is built on this sacred versus secular, whereas everything is sacred. There's not a place or a time or a period or anything that is not sacred.
The question, can one be spiritual and not be religious? I just want to back up and just examine it as a question. It assumes too much. I think the question is skewed towards religion. It seems to say that there are two possible answers. Either, yes, one can be spiritual and not religious, in which case, okay, many people who feel that they are and would describe themselves as spiritual but not religious are accurate in their self-assessment. And that is condescending. And certainly the notion that the answer might be no, one cannot be spiritual and not be religious, assumes that there is some place in which a person can stand up and say, there is a God, it's this particular God, and this particular God has mandated this particular religion, and anything outside of that is not correct. That has yet to be proven. Prove that first, and then we can ask this question. But until you have some kind of notion that there is some ground by which you could say no to that question, then it's not a question. If the question cannot have either a yes or no, if it's a yes or no question, and it cannot have either a yes or no answer, there is no real possibility of a no in this, then it's not a real question. It just looks like a question. It's been placed there to make us think religiously. And I'm against that. You can put a question mark at the end of every statement. That doesn't make it a question.
I think it cuts in both directions. I mean, I think there's a sense in which some people are saying, can you actually be spiritual if you're still in religion?
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
and I think that is as problematic as the other.
Well, I love that answer. That's what I was like. I say I was disturbed to encounter this question in a kind of academic setting. Didn't know what to say. I had a lot of conversations in my head, the way you do. And but this is the right answer. I should have said, well, can one be spiritual and religious? It strikes me that seems the least likely. But obviously, one can be spiritual and religious. To say no would be to say that I have some ground to answer that. Then I cannot establish that ground. That ground has yet to be established. If you want more content like this, we're building a website at faithfulcrum.com. Or you want to get in touch, email us at faithfulcrum@gmail.com.
So, Mark, what new hymn do we have for this week?
Well, it isn't written yet, but I expect to write it later today. And I think it's called The Pigeon and the Dove. Spirituality versus religion. One is a beautiful dove, one is a pigeon. One is the spirit of love, one of division. And let's not forget all the superstition. Religion versus spirituality. One says you ought to be a little bit more like me. The other says everyone must be free. Must be. Religion versus spirituality. One's about faith, one is certainty. Certainly, spirituality versus religion. One is a beautiful dove, one is a pigeon. One is the spirit of love, one is division. Let's not forget that silly superstition. Silly. Let's not ever forget the superstition.